Good morning. Welcome board members and guests to the Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. Board actions will be by roll call vote today. Public comment. After I open an item for public comment, those joining us by Zoom webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button located in the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you are joining over the phone, you can press *9. PCTPA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comment to solvisable at ssabol@pctpa.net. Thank you. And Supervisor Holmes, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
My great honor. Please join me in the salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Supervisor Holmes. Solvi, could we get a roll call, please?
Broadway.
Here.
Burris. Cortez.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes.
Here.
Howdesheld.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Here.
We have quorum.
Perfect. Thank you. Agenda review is the next item on our agenda. Are there any changes needed in the agenda today?
No, Chair. Agenda remains unchanged.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next item is AB 2449. Matt, any?
No action
Action needed?
required. All are present or noticed accordingly.
Okay. Thank you. Next item is item E. It's approval of the minutes for September 25th, 2024. Those minutes have been provided and were available in the packet as well as online. Are there any modifications that were noted or needed in the minutes? None? Okay, none from staff. All right, could I get action on the minutes, please?
Move approval.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris. Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes.
Aye.
Howdesheld.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
I'm sure she's an aye.
She stepped out.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda is item F, that's public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on our agenda today. If you do have items that you wish to speak on, please limit those comments to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here in chambers that wishes to speak on an item not on our agenda today? If you do, please approach the podium.
Calendar between now through the 4th of December, and it's pretty busy since there's no meeting of this body in November. On the 21st of this month, Roseville Road Station closed to motorist and light rail passengers due to construction crews coming in to perform platform modifications in compliance to eventually operate the new S700 low-floor light rail vehicles on the Blue Line. Come 2027. Roseville Road is expected to fully reopen the morning of November 9th, but can be later depending on any changes in the weather forecast. A lot of motorists drive into Roseville Road Station, I'm sure as you know, from Placer County, and like to switch from car to rail at that station because of the abundant number of parking spaces, but won't be able to until then. On today, the 23rd today, Capitol Corridor celebrates 1 millionth rider for the fiscal year. The selected rider departed Sacramento Valley Station this morning at 8:55 a.m. according to KCRA and My 58 television. Tomorrow, the Sacramento Kings begin the 2024-2025 regular season hosting the Minnesota Timberwolves at Golden One Center. Roseville Transit's Game Day Express will once again serve Kings fans in Placer County for all 41 regular season home games. The pickup and drop-off is at the Civic Center transfer point. On the 19th, of November, the Roseville Transportation Commission will meet at 6 p.m. in chambers at the Civic Center transfer point to adopt a final recommendation of the Alternative Transportation Division's comprehensive operational analysis. The plan is expected to be on a city council agenda in early 2025. On the 20th, the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority Board will hold its final meeting of 2024 at 10 a.m. in the BART Boardroom in Oakland. This is an in-person meeting and is open for all for public participation. And finally, on December 4th, the final meeting of your board is expected on this date for calendar year 2024. Along with this date marks 29 days after the November 24 general election. The 58 county elections offices throughout California and California Secretary of State will be expected to release the official certified election results no later than this date by law. And that's the calendar update. Thank you again. I'm Michael Barnbaum, and I approve this message.
I have one question, Michael.
Yeah.
Were you the millionth writer on?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, I'm so disappointed. Yeah, you should have been.
Nah. It's okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in chambers that wishes to comment on an item not on our agenda? Do we have anyone online?
No.
All right, I'd also like to note that Alice has joined us. Welcome.
Sorry to be tardy.
Nope, that's all right.
I had such a long commute.
All right, great, thank you. All right, there being no further public comment, we'll move to our consent calendar, item G for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial, and they'll be acted upon in one action without discussion. Does anyone from the board wish to remove an item from the consent calendar?
I have none.
None. Does anyone from the public here in chambers wishes to remove an item? Do we have anyone online? No. I will bring it back to the board for action.
I will second Director Caviello's motion.
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
All right, we have
Trying to
a
be efficient.
reverse order motion and second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez. Aye. Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Next item is item H. This will be a public hearing for the Placer County Government Center Master Plan Amendment, Consistency, and Determination. And I believe David Melko is going to present that item.
Good morning, members of the commission. We're asking you to conduct a public hearing regarding the consistency of the Placer County Government Center Master Plan with the Placer County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And as staff, we're recommending that you find the Master Plan Amendment consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, subject to the recommended overflight condition, and our Technical Advisory Committee concurs with this recommendation. I do have a slide deck here. It's about 10 slides that summarizes the lengthy staff report, and so I'll walk through that, and then we'll move on with public hearing. So just as kind of a refresher for the audience as well as the commissioners, just the role of the commission. Your role is to adopt and maintain airport land use compatibility plans. We have 3 compatibility plans: Blue Canyon, Auburn, and Lincoln Airports. And number 2, basically your responsibility and our responsibility is to review changes to plans, zoning regulations, and other land use regulations within the airport influence area for consistency with the airport land use compatibility plan. So when we, because the Airport Land Use Commission has the title land use within it, it often causes confusion with the public. Our responsibility is focused on 4 factors: We look at noise, safety concerns, airspace protection, and overflight. And notwithstanding that there are a number of issues that come up as part of a land use entitlement process, this is not the venue for that. The venue for that is, in this particular instance, it'll be with Placer County Board of Supervisors and their Planning Commission. You have three potential consistency determinations. You can find it consistent, you can find it consistent subject to conditions, or you can find it inconsistent based on specific conflicts. So the master plan came before this commission back in 2019, and we found the master plan consistent, subject to incorporation of overflight conditions and adherence to height regulations identified in the compatibility plan. So the majority of the master plan falls within compatibility zone D, and just as a refresher, compatibility zone D permits a lot of different types of development. You get more restrictive as you move closer to the airport. There is a portion of the the government center master plan that falls within compatibility zone C2. So in terms of what the county is requesting of us, they're requesting to amend the development standard to allow hospitals and extended care facilities as an allowable use in the master plan commercial plan development zone district. And I have a map that will show where that CPD zone is so that you have that as a reference. And this would be allowable with the approval of a minor use permit, because you have a master plan in place. The minor use permit is the appropriate way to move forward with those types of uses. The amendment would also provide consistency between the master plan, commercial plan development zone district, and the commercial plan development zone district as defined in the Placer County zoning ordinance. Currently, the zoning ordinance allows hospitals and extended uses with a conditional use permit. And the difference between the minor use permit and the conditional use permit is that you have a master plan in place for this particular development, and so the minor use permit is a less intensive review because you have adherence to a variety of master plan regulations. So the map here, basically, the dark sort of gray line, black line, shows the outline for the commercial plan development district. Majority of that falls in zone D, a portion falls in compatibility zone C2. So the county, as part of their development standards, and I know it's kind of hard to read here, but you do have an attachment that indicates they've incorporated development standards and specific use regulations that basically are consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan. It notes that hospitals and extended care uses are not permissible in zone D. Outpatient types of uses are permissible in both zone C2 and D. And they also reference the compatibility plan and the appropriate compatibility table, which is actually something that we have been encouraging all of the jurisdictions to do as a reference with their zoning ordinance, so that when the planner is working on the particular project, they know that there is a reference to the applicable airport land use compatibility plan. So this is kind of an abbreviated table of the compatibility table for Auburn Airport, and extended care uses fall within the catch-all category of congregate care. There's a variety of different types of care facilities. And as you can see in zone C2, it's red, which means it's not allowable, and that would be consistent with the development standards that the county is bringing forward. It is allowable in zone D. Inpatient medical facilities, which includes hospitals and nursing homes, are once again not permissible in zone C2, but they are allowed within zone D. Outpatient medical facilities, which include healthcare centers, clinics.
David, can I just really interrupt very quickly?
Sure.
Because we keep talking about zone C2 and what's allowed in D. Where the project is proposed in which zone?
The project covers both, falls within both zone C2 and D.
So it's in both?
Yes.
Thank you. I
But-
just wanted that to be clarified for the record.
Well, let me clarify the question. We don't have a project before.
We don't,
it.
yeah, yeah.
No.
The project is a master plan amendment to allow hospitals and extended care facilities within the commercial plan development district within the master plan. It just so happens that the commercial plan development district is overlaid by compatibility zone C2 and zone D. Majority of it is within zone D. And so in terms of use regulations, the county is proposed development standards that follow the airport land use compatibility plan, that if a hospital use was ever put forward, it would need to be located in compatibility zone D. If an extended care facility was put forward, it would have to be located in compatibility zone D. Outpatient type uses could happen in both types of compatibility zones.
And is this an outpatient?
Well, once again, the proposal is to allow, to amend the compatibility plan to include hospitals and extended care facilities. And a hospital falls in an inpatient use, and an extended care facility would fall under a congregate care. We just recommended to the county as part of their development standards to make clear that, because hospitals sometimes have outpatient uses, various clinics associated with it. That clinic could be located in D and or zone C2. So we were just making it clear with that. Okay, so good questions. So in terms of the consistency analysis, this page here, slide summarizes the staff report. Compatibility zone C, 2, and D fall outside the 55 noise contour. And once you get beyond the 55 noise contour, noise is not considered a significant impact. In terms of safety, once again, an inpatient medical facility and extended care, and an inpatient medical facility would include a hospital, is not allowed in compatibility zone C2. It is allowed in zone D. An outpatient medical facility, should such a facility ever be proposed, could occur in either zone. They would have to meet the the intensity standards for that type of facility. So since the development standards proposed by the county follow the ALUCP requirements, it's consistent, or we're saying no impact. In terms of the master plan, the current master plan establishes a maximum building height of 50 feet, and that was something that was discussed in 2019, because originally they had a higher building height. But there was concern with respect to adherence to the ALUCP. The compatibility zone C2 has a maximum building height of 70 feet, and compatibility zone has a maximum height of 150, so we're consistent there. In terms of overflight, we're carrying forward a recommendation that the board, or the commission approved back in 2019, that required an airport proximity notice be included for the non-residential development. And since this master plan amendment includes a hospital and potentially outpatient uses as well as extended care, we're recommending that proximity notice be carried forward and be included as a condition. So, wrapping up, our recommendation is that you find the master plan amendment consistent with the ALUCP, subject to including the overflight notification condition, and you authorize the executive director to submit a consistency determination letter to Placer County. I will note that we do have, I think I saw in the audience Jonathan Wright from the City of Auburn here, and he may wish to speak to this issue. And we also have the Placer County planner for this particular project, Callie Kettinger Cecil, here as well. And with that, your next steps are to conduct a public hearing and to make a consistency determination.
All right, are there any questions for staff?
So David, would this only apply to Auburn, or would this apply because it's an amendment?
This would,
Would it apply to Lincoln? Would it apply?
no, this,
It's just the government center?
right.
The amendment to allow medical facilities within this would only apply to this particular airport.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
David, I'm going to give you a current events test on C2. Assume a contract from the county to a given homeless provider wants to put a respite center in C2. It's outpatient, but you've got people convalescing in the C2 zone. Would that be allowed?
There is a different, we dealt with this issue a number of years ago with the commission when there was
I remember.
an emergency shelter proposed within the Auburn area, and an amendment was made to the ALUCP to identify where emergency shelters fall. So it's sort of a gray area, because if there's a medical type use, it could be an outpatient use. So, in that regard, it's allowable here, provided you meet the intensity standards. But there is another portion of this airport land use compatibility plan that identifies emergency shelters, but in that regard, the emergency shelter is more of a residential use because people are there living for a period of time, a short stay. Once again, short stay lodging is an allowable use in compatibility zone C2. You have to meet intensity standards, and so, or in residential case, it's a density standard, so the number of people allowed per acre. A change to the master plan would require the county to come back to us. So if the county was proposing a use that was different than the norm, and so a homeless type shelter use associated with outpatient medical facilities, then I think we would recommend to the county that they bring it back to us for review.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay. We'll open the public hearing. And do we have anyone here in chambers that wishes to comment or ask questions regarding this item?
Might as well, right? Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commission members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. Did have a conversation with PCTPA staff as well as county staff. Just wanted to reiterate some of the points that we raised. Once again, we are here talking about the airport, the Auburn Airport overflight area, which is a constant hot topic of change in intensities and uses and things like that, which are always a concern to the airport itself. Like to state that while we believe that under the current land use compatibility plan that this is consistent, so we're in agreement, but want to point out that runway 25, the overflight per our noise abatement ordinance, requires everybody departing to the west to take a left-hand turn. Now, specifically in that guidance, it says to avoid the hospital for obvious reasons. Aircraft goes down in a hospital and you have people that can't get out, you have a lot of, the casualty rate would be much higher. So we discourage those types of uses and obviously encourage our aircraft to avoid them. Then as soon as they get past that, then they go about their merry way, which is why if you work at the government building or the government center, you hear aircraft flying all the time. So it is the most active area of overflight, and that's where this is being proposed. So we do have life, health, safety concerns with this type of use in that area. The other thing I'd like to point out is we are in a master plan process for the Auburn Airport. Even in our current master plan, there's a discussion about the maximum runway length, which at some point we hope to achieve. We are pressing hard in this update to make sure that we do get to that 5,000 foot or close to that 5,000 foot runway length, which would force another overflight amendment to that zone, which would push that C2 farther into the government center, which would then make any use that had been allowed under this current zoning non-conforming. So just want to be on record for that, and I appreciate your time this morning. Take care.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have anyone else in chambers that wishes to comment on this item? Being none, do we have anyone online? We do not. All
Mr.
right.
Chair, I didn't understand that last comment. So if the runway extends, it pushes C2 further? Can you pull up that map? 'Cause-
Changes the entire ring.
Yeah, I get that. But I need to understand where the government center is. In this black and white, I can't see it. Can we look at it again? Sorry to be so active in my comments this morning. I do need to learn to fly one day.
So, the city is undertaking a master plan amendment or a master plan update.
I just need to see the map.
Yeah, and so this is the map here. And
I
so,
don't see it.
yeah,
Oh, it's behind me.
yeah. And so,
So it's over there.
It's over there.
it's.
So well, here's my question. I see D. Where's the airport? Is the airport to the left?
No.
In this picture?
I want to move to the,
Other map.
sorry, I went backwards. It's hard to see here, but
Concentric rings,
yeah,
D,
those all of those compatibility zones potentially could be affected by Auburn's master plan update. And so we will go through a review and look at, once again, the 4 factors: noise, safety, overflight, and compatibility. And those compatibility zones may change. And
They'll likely change. I mean,
Lower left.
yeah, there's a lot of factors that need to be taken into account. And so, but because the overflight, as Jonathan had mentioned, is primarily in the direction of where the master plan area is, compatibility zone C2 will probably expand and will creep more into what is currently zone D.
Will it go further west?
Part D, part
Yes.
C.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand.
Right.
The comment, it pushes it out,
Right.
which if it, I'm trying to figure out my bearings here, which means that I would fail any pilot testing right now. But when you say push it further out, doesn't that mean it's beyond the government center?
I would imagine that more of the government center under a 5,000-foot runway will fall within compatibility zone C2.
All right, good, all right. Thanks for the
Yeah,
clarification.
right.
I don't need anything
Yeah.
more.
And
We got a full agenda. I just wanted to be knowledgeable.
So,
I just wanted to.
maybe I can ask a very quick question, just curiosity. Long ago and far away, I used to fly. Most hospitals are marked from the air. Would facilities that are not necessarily hospital be marked in an environment like this, just so that pilots from outside the area know what they're looking at if they gotta find a place to land fast? Can we make that a condition?
we could.
Mark it on the
We
roof.
could, yeah, we could, that if such a facility goes forward, that it be appropriately marked so that a pilot could recognize it
I think
as.
that would be wise.
Yeah.
Yep. How would that affect the existing?
Hold on,
we're not done.
hold on. We haven't closed public comment, fortunately, so if you would like to approach, please approach.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Kim Gibson. I'm just curious how this may affect existing facilities.
Well, existing facilities are not subject to the Airport Land Use Commission review because they're grandfathered in and they follow whatever plan or zoning was in place at the time that it was developed. Now, if something, they become a non-conforming use. And so there's a set of guidelines here in how we address changes to non-conforming uses. So if a change occurred with that non-conforming use, we'd have to adhere to those particular policies in terms of how we deal with that situation.
Okay.
So the condition here for marking the building would only apply to new facilities, or potentially it could also apply to a non-conforming use that went through a proposed change. So, but
Grandfathered in with.
an existing building that was not there were no changes to it. It just existed and people were doing their daily lives, working there. That building would not be subject to this condition. And it would be voluntary if somebody wanted to go forward and to do something like that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Do we have anyone else in chambers who wishes to comment on this item? Do we have anyone else online? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Do we have any other questions?
I have comments if there are any.
Okay, before we go to comments, Alice, we'll see if we have any questions. Is that okay? Yes, sir.
So there is a proposed, and this is, there's a proposed facility, might be actually be under construction. It's a senior facility called Generations Care. That is somewhere near here.
Yeah.
Is it in C1 or C2? And would it be covered?
It's in C1 and it's
Okay.
off of, I think, Professional Drive or something.
Yeah, okay.
That area. Yeah.
That was, okay.
I believe it's on education.
Education, yes.
Yeah.
And it would be marked or not?
Well,
So
so that building went through a review with county staff probably 2 years ago. And the main concern there, well, there were two concerns. One was height in that particular zone, and also the type of patients that were,
If I could, through the chair, the answer's no.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I may. Thanks, David, for your report. Now, at the corner of Highway 49 and Bell Road is the former site of Rock Creek School. And if the event, a senior center went in that facility, would there be any kind of conditions that would not let that happen? Remember, it was a school for young children.
right, right. Well, yeah, we would need to look at the specifics being proposed, but and depending upon the exact location, there is a Green Means Go sort of overlay within the Auburn area that allows for mixed uses and increased residential densities. We probably would look at the proposed new use versus the former use because the school had a number of employees and students there. So there's already a density. So we would take that into account looking at the proposed use. So,
But the school must have been grandfathered in.
correct, it was.
And does that go with the land or does that go with the use?
Goes with the use.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Move staff approval.
Well, hold on. We have comments.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a comment, so thank you. I appreciate the complexity of this particular issue and the fact that our scope is very narrow here as the Airport Land Use Commission, as PCTPA. But I just want to reiterate our city staff's comments. This is consistent currently. You know, we have concerns anytime you have any proposed project within that area of the airport, especially in an area that's such an active overflight area. There are tons of complaints that keep getting registered and so forth, safety issues, things of that nature. So it is really for the purposes of the record that while it is currently consistent, we do have concerns just with regards to the general kinds of issues that come up. Also, with regards to our master plan update for the airport, as our city staff indicated, or my city staff indicated, that there is the possibility that that C2 zoning or overlay, or whatever you want to call it, is going to expand, and so that this area would be non-conforming. So while it could be approved now, if there were significant changes to the project, once the airport master plan was adopted, it would maybe in a non-conforming situation. So it's kind of confusing, but I'll support this, but I just want to go on the record, you know, because I think that there can be things that can come up later, so, especially with regards to our airport master plan.
Through the chair, if I may,
Yes.
that's actually a very good point, coming at this from another direction. One of the things we want to do is preserve the airport's ability to lengthen their runway if they so desire, and not constrain them by getting things built that will prevent them from doing that. So we need to be very aware.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to say it for the purpose of the
So
record,
what is
because
the probability in the next 20 years that the runway is extended?
what's the probability? I would refer to our city staff if what the probability is.
And in Lincoln, we're trying to do the same thing.
Yes.
Chair, members of the commission, Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director, City of Auburn. It's very likely that's one of our two top priorities. One is to rehab or replace our terminal building. Number two is because of the safety of our runway is to extend that. And that's been our goal for quite some time, and I've talked to PCTPA staff for a while about that. So we are looking at avenues right now, in fact, dealing with some landfill issues out there, as most of you are aware, to try to figure out how we negotiate this and make it a reality. So, thank you.
So we need to be extremely sensitive to that as we move forward.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Other comments from the board? And I will just share from my chair, when we talk about it, and this, regarding approval, I think this is able to be approved, given the conditions. I think where I'm running into a concern, and it's relative to just the overarching role that we play, both as elected officials in our communities, is when I hear government center, and we're talking about expanding and making available additional uses in a government center. Is this a use in what is a government center, which is services that are provided to enhance the support of our communities, versus when we start talking about hospitals, is our county going to start running a hospital, or are you going to start running a retirement center? And if not, why is that basically an expanded use in a government center? You know, what is our government center actually intended for? But that is just a general comment, not necessarily, and I'm sorry, we've closed comment, so, and we're not needing additional discussion. We can certainly have discussion at a later time, but I'm just sharing with you that when I hear government center, if our intent is for this to be a government center, our usage, and then that ties right into the airport. The airport was there first, and when we're looking at the type of actions we're taking, is it in alignment with uses? So I want to ensure that we are looking broadly in relationship to our actions and what we're doing. This in relationship to our role here, but I just want to share from my chair in working. The reason we are so successful in Placer County is because we collaborate and we work together for the betterment of our overall community, and I want to ensure we continue to do that. And so just want to share that. Okay? All right, so so with that, I believe we are at a point, if there's no further discussion, could I get an action on this item?
Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to move approval of staff recommendation.
I second.
Discussion, would that include the proposed amendment to mark the building for airport, for the air?
Would you add that to your motion?
desire.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, could we get a roll call vote?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez. Aye. Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right,
Mr. Chair, I would note that this is probably the most discussion we've had about an airport land use consistency thing in a long time.
And I welcome it. I welcome that. I welcome that.
Well, you know.
thank you. And for the record, Callie, my apologies. You're here, and we did not recognize you before we closed, so I do apologize. But thank you for being here, too. All right. All right, with that, we're going to move to the next item, which is item I. That is our 2024 Unmet Transit Needs Assessment and Public Engagement Efforts, and I believe Mike Costa is going to present that today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the board and members of the public. This item is before you today because of PCTPA's responsibility as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency that administers Transportation Development Act funds, or TDA funds. TDA funds are broken into two major categories, one being the Local Transportation Funds, or LTF, the other being State Transit Assistance Funds, or STA funds, which are generated from those sources that you see on the left. This item is actually going before you because as part of our administration of these two funds, STA funds are actually funds that transit operators use to support their operations and to support their capital needs. These funds go directly to operators for that use. LTF funds are also intended to support transit operations and transit capital needs. However, under TDA regulations, LTF funds can be used for other purposes by local jurisdictions for purposes like street and road maintenance or repair work. And those purposes, though, have to be approved essentially through a process called the Unmet Transit Needs Assessment. Unmet Transit Needs Assessment is so that if there are transit needs that are determined during that process, those get addressed first before these funds can be used for other purposes such as street and road maintenance. So that's why we conduct an annual unmet transit needs assessment each year, because our local jurisdictions do actually use LTF for other purposes. So what is an unmet transit need, and what is the other criteria that we have to look at as staff to evaluate these needs and comments? Unmet transit needs essentially are needs for services that do not exist today. So they're not necessarily for operational matters, but it's for services that do not exist or for services required under the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA regulations. But that's not the only thing that staff has to look at when assessing unmet transit needs. We also have to look at criteria that our board established, and these are all the criteria before you, that this board established in 2022 for reasonable to meet factors. Those factors generate around, are these services that we are implementing potentially, are they feasible? Are they supported? Will they be sustainable in terms of meeting fare box and other service operability requirements? And are they consistent with some of our planning efforts, both in our long-range regional transportation plan as well as our short-range transit planning efforts? So this criteria that you see before you, again, was adopted by this board to assess unmet transit needs, and they're reasonable to meet factors. So just kind of a very brief history of what are some previous unmet transit needs that this board approved of, the latest one being when we looked at expanding the ability for ADA eligible riders to cross service boundaries without having to actually get off the bus. That was done back in 2019 through Placer County Transit when looking at right now any general public member on demand has to use services and transfer buses at boundaries of the cities under Placer County Transit regulations. But for ADA users, an unmet need was found that those users that are eligible can cross the boundaries without having to transfer buses at the jurisdictional line. So as part of our process, we do this every year in the fall. We actually, for this year's unmet transit needs process, we started a survey that was launched in early September. That survey was available, or excuse me, is still available until October 31st, so next Thursday, where members of the public can take the survey and again, we want to hear any comments related to unmet transit needs that we then as staff, after the survey closes, assess per the criteria on the previous slide, and then we bring back to the board our recommended findings on determination for unmet transit needs in the early part of next year. So one of the things I'd like to mention before I go into how people can provide comment is staff does extensive outreach for the unmet transit needs process. We actually go out into almost every jurisdiction and community with pop-up events that we've done this year. I think this year we did around 20 different events that we've done in the community. We also distribute flyers, notices, and publications to all of our transit partners. That's Auburn Transit, Roseville Transit, and Placer County Transit. We provide your local jurisdictional staff with unmet transit needs information so that they're aware of this process, and then they promote through their various channels that the cities and local jurisdictions have. And we work with our social service transportation partners as well and our nonprofits to distribute information about unmet transit needs. So we do some extensive work out in the community to be able to generate any comments that we can assess for unmet transit needs. Of course, we do encourage members of the public to submit their comments to us via the survey that is available on our website, as well as they can email me or contact me, and that's another way that they can provide their comments. And our surveys are available in alternative languages such as Spanish and Tagalog as well. So with that, if the board doesn't have any questions, staff would recommend that the board open up the public hearing process that we're required to do as part of this annual assessment. And if there are members of the public that do have comments about unmet transit needs, we do ask kindly that they be very specific about their unmet transit needs with the criteria that you see on the slide above. I'm available for any questions if the board has any. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Any questions for staff? If not, I will open the public hearing. Do we we have anyone here in chambers that wishes to comment on this item? Please approach. Hold on just a second, Michael. No, please, come on.
Hello, again, thank you. I'm Kimberly Gibson. Mr. Costa, nice to meet you. I just wanted to say I'm here to promote busing in Forest Hill. We are longtime residents in Forest Hill, about 37 years. And I have a son with disabilities, which would fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it is a huge, significant need in Forest Hill to have the availability for different individuals with disabilities that are seniors, that are in-house, that otherwise have a very difficult time getting into Auburn for doctor's appointments, for work, for shopping. They're basically stuck. I get calls all the time. Can you give me a ride? Can you take me here? Do you know anyone that can give us a ride? We need a ride. We can't get to our appointments. I'm hoping that we can get a bus that would come up, say, at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then return from the Nevada station at 3 o'clock, so it wouldn't be a significant burden to the road, to traffic, to congestion. It would just be a one up and one down trip a day. I think that would significantly enable residents that are otherwise stuck without a way down to be able to live a more productive life, which would affect a lot of things. It would relieve probably a lot police or sheriff, ambulances, a lot of people that are used as resources, if that makes sense. But there is a definite need up there because there is no public transit. Ubers don't go up there. I mean, an Uber will go up there, but it's very expensive. They would rather not. And then too, in safety issues, say, if there's an issue where we need to get some of these people out that don't drive, the availability of a bus, to go up and be available for them if they need to leave, it would be significant.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time. Please consider. Thank you.
All right. Do we have anyone else? Michael?
Thank you. Michael Barnbaum again. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about has been pretty much covered in the comprehensive operational analysis exercise this board and staff undertook for the last year, and it's going to transition to eventually a final short-range transit plan. So this process, I think, will be very critical in the elements of the short-range transit plan that you'll be looking at, because a lot of things through unmet transit needs you're going to ask is it consistent with the short-range transit plan? And if it likely is not necessarily consistent, the finding might be from the Social Service Transportation Advisory Council that it's just not an unmet need. So here are just some of the things to highlight that I want to provide to you. Generally speaking, span of service. Service hours currently don't go late into night. If you're going to be coming from the venue at Thunder Valley for a concert or coming back from downtown at the Golden One Center, again, Roseville Transit is the only one providing a service, and it's only for Game Day Express. It is not currently for any other event held there. So that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. Sunday and holiday service on Placer County Transit, Auburn Transit, and Roseville Transit needs to be taken into consideration. Primarily, those services don't run that day of the week. And the other one, or I have two, riders brought to my attention on Route 10. This is a Placer County transit line from Auburn to Watt Avenue in Sacramento County. Along Sierra College Boulevard, the route operates between Interstate 80 and Sierra College, but does not have a stop currently on Sierra College Boulevard, southbound at Dominguez Road, or northbound at Bass Pro Drive. And riders were asking, can a stop be constructed there? It would be for the convenience of the riders, and the operator would not deviate from the roads they're currently driving on. I thought that was a simple request, and maybe that can be looked at. And then the other thing, sorry if I'm going to go over time, to the speaker's last point, it reminded me about maybe a micro-transit.
And I do need you to wrap up.
Yes, I'm going to wrap up with this comment. Maybe a micro-transit or a service referred to as VIA. VIA has a good service model in West Sacramento with the Yolo County Transportation District, where they help transport people in vulnerable populations, as described by the previous speaker. And that model actually is going to be adopted, I'm told, starting January 1st in Sacramento County, replacing the Smart Ride service that has been running for the last 5 to 8 years there. So that's something to keep an eye on and see if that can be an unmet transit need program implemented throughout Placer County.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have anyone else here in chambers who wishes to comment on this item? Do we have anyone online? Mike, do you have information you need from the individuals who spoke? All right, wonderful. Great. We will close the public hearing. I'll bring it back to the board for comments or a motion. Do we have any comments or questions? Could I get action on this item, please? Oh, I'm sorry, this is informational only. I'm just so used to you guys keeping me moving, so thank you for that information. Next item is item J, that is Senate Bill 125 Funding Program Administration and Distribution Guidelines. And Mike, I believe you're presenting that as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. So a little bit of background on this item. Back in July of last year, the state of California passed Senate Bill 125, which actually provided a one-time funding source boost for all of the transit operators throughout California. It was mainly in response to the significant impacts to ridership and financial status for our larger operators in result of the pandemic. And what that one-time funding source did was actually establish two sub-funding programs. One actually existed but was expanded to include additional eligibility for transit operators. And then a new program called the Zero Emission Transit Capital Program was established to further support operators' needs in their efforts to convert fleets and facilities over to zero emission technology. Under that funding source, PCTPA received a little over $37 million, actually closer to $38 million, that we, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, were responsible to administer those funds and distribute to our transit operators throughout the region. We were required under the regulations of Senate Bill 125 to submit an allocation request package to the California State Transportation Authority, or CalSTA, in December. And that package was subsequently approved, actually, by CalSTA, and then we did receive our first roughly half of the funding, over $18 million in a check for our projects that we submitted and were approved. Just to recap, we did receive funding for the projects shown here on the screen. We do actually have some regional projects, especially the Capital Corridor Third Track project that was funded under this program, as well as some local projects for the city of Auburn. And then we also have some projects for Placer County Transit distributed among many different jurisdictions within the Placer County Transit service area. And then Roseville Transit also had some funding allocated to them under this program. So one of the things that was important to note and why staff is bringing this item to this board for approval today is actually staff met with the transit operators after we were notified that the funding was approved to determine how we would actually distribute the funding once we received it, because we knew that we were not getting all of the funding up front. So we wanted to be able to have some guidelines and policies on how we were to distribute these funds once they were available. So after meeting with the transit operators, staff prepared these set of guidelines to help administer and document and memorialize that administration process for how we distribute the funds. In those guidelines that are contained in your board packet, we established different protocols and procedures and kind of, again, the process by which we distribute the funds and how we track the funds. PCTPA is recommending that PCTPA, and this is actually required under the SB 125 guidelines, we control all the funds and maintain the interest and account for that interest and collectively determine how that interest is then distributed once it's accrued. Also, for the project agencies to directly receive their funds, PCTPA is recommending that it is distributed on a first-come, first-served basis based on a reimbursement methodology. So once an entity can show proof of their ability to expend the funds, that is when PCTPA can distribute those funds. The other requirements is that we would establish an actual agreement with each of the receiving transit entities, or what we are calling project sponsors for these funds, and that those entities receiving these funds are responsible for providing us any documentation and supporting material in case we are audited by CalSTA for these funds. So we are going to require that from the entities. And then lastly, we are establishing a protocol in these guidelines for agencies that want to amend their project, because under SB 125 guidelines, we have to inform CalSTA if we make a significant change to the initial allocation request package that we submitted and was subsequently approved. So we are going to have that agreement with our agencies that this can be a flexible source of funding, but also it's something that if there are changes, we need to be notified and we need to be able to work with the agencies and collaborate on that process before we actually distribute the funds to those agencies. Also contained within your package is a very, I would say, broad and preliminary schedule for how the agencies have determined how and when they're going to be using or asking for the funds. And so that's contained as an attachment to the guidelines as well that we wanted to just provide to the board for information. So with that, we are recommending as staff that the board adopt and direct our staff to administer these guidelines for the administration and distribution of SB 125 funds. This was presented, of course, to our technical advisory committee, and they concurred with these findings as well as all of our transit operators that are receiving these funds. I'm available for any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mike, any questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for putting this together. You mentioned under amendments or changes to the SB 125 funded projects. In the language, it says that they are allowed, but that they may require approval from CalSTA before PCTPA can reprogram and distribute the funding accordingly. What triggers that requirement that it go back to CalSTA?
That's a very good question, and I don't know exactly what that looks like yet because CalSTA still has not fully defined what they would consider a significant change to the allocation request package. So what would happen as of right now is that if we received a request from the entities to change their projects, I would immediately work with those agencies to clearly define that change, but then also I'd probably work with my counterparts at CalSTA to see, okay, what does this look like, and is this going to be a formal change or amendment to the allocation request package? Because again, the guidelines are a little bit fuzzy right now on what that
Their
looks like.
guidelines are fuzzy.
That's correct.
So, yeah, that's the only thing that was a little bit unclear because I just didn't know what would trigger that. And it sounds like we don't really know yet, but think that certainly working with CalSTA makes sense at this point in time. But once their guidelines become more clear, which I hope they are, I would hope that we could perhaps add that clarity to our guidelines as well, just so that it's clear to everybody. So, thank you.
All right, any other questions? No? All right, great, thank you. We'll open it up for any questions from the public on this item. Is there anyone in chambers who wishes to comment on this item or ask a question? Is that?
Didn't we already do that?
No, not on this item.
Oh, this is 120.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair Broadway, I did have some questions or comments on it. First, I want to say thank you, Michael, for your presentation on this. That was wonderful news to hear at least half of the funds of the SB 125 allocations have been released by the state to regional transportation planning agencies like PCTPA. I did not see, however, in the presentation any mention within the agency of the Transit Operators Working Group. I did see the Technical Advisory Committee, so I don't know if this reached that length or that far to get to the TOWG, which at SACOG would be the Transit Coordinating Committee. And I did want to acknowledge to you and your board, Mr. Chairman, Michael graciously serves on a group called the Transit Transformation Task Force, which SB 125 has been a big discussion of. That task force is spearheaded by Michael Pimentel, the executive director of the California Transit Association. And Michael, it's my understanding, is the only representative throughout the 6-county region to serve on the Transit Transformation Task Force. So as it relates to then going back to the previous item and putting this item and that together, you might find a lot of transit needs not reasonable to me due to there not being any money. But with SB 125, and then the one thing I know we're all in this room going to be monitoring is the outcome on November 5th of Measure B. If things look very positive after that, we can probably look back and hopefully get some more positive news at the December meeting. If we did get a certification that was official about the outcome of the election in general, but specifically Measure B. So again, yes, thank you for the report. And if the presenter does have anything to add about the Transit Operators Working Group or the Transit Transformation Task Force as it relates to this item, I'd be interested to hear what has to come to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We'll see if there's any other comments, and then we'll address that. All right, do we have anyone else in chambers who wishes to comment on this item? Do we have anyone online? Mike, would you like to address that question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To address Mr. Barnbaum's question, the Transit Operators Working Group actually consists of the 3 operators, as I mentioned before, as well as representatives from each of our member jurisdictions at PCTPA. Those representatives are also reflected in our TAC. So therefore, we did go to our TAC with this item. It wasn't an action at the TOG, but it was an action at our TAC, and so there was representation from all of our member agencies in these discussions, as well as our operators.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, with that, we have no more public comment. I'll bring it back to the board. Any additional comments, questions? And if not, could I get an action on this item?
Mr. Chair, I move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Sylvie, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next item is item K, the South Placer, South Sutter Fair Share Transportation Funding Analysis Final Report, and David Melko is going to present that.
Okay. We have 2 actions here that we're recommending. We're recommending that as the board, you accept that the South Placer, South Sutter Fair Share Transportation Funding Analysis final report is complete based on the recommendation of the study's project development team. Project development team consisted of staff from Sutter County, Placer County, and the city of Roseville. And then with that acceptance, authorize the executive director to transmit that final report and all the related modeling files and all the supporting documentation to the respective jurisdictions as part of the scope of work. I do have a 5 or 6 slides that kind of summarize the staff report. So we were before this board in June with a fairly lengthy board presentation on the draft report, a lot of comments. At that point in time, it was noted that we were conducting a 45-day review period. And so this slide here basically recaps all of the activities from June 26th to now. And so we went through that 45-day review period. We received 20 comments. The final report actually has an appendix that has a matrix of those comments and the responses. And the comments basically address the various technical aspects of the analysis. There was one specific recommendation that the consultant had prepared that was revised, and that was based upon a comment to include that when Sutter County moves forward with a fee program, that they include a market absorption analysis as part of looking at fees on non-residential development, because there was a question about the horizon year build-out of that particular set of land uses. And then the other comment that came that we thought was a very good comment was that we look at the gap on Riego Baseline Road. There is a gap, a physical gap, where there is no specific plan and development proposed, and so how we would address that. And so that analysis was also incorporated and included as an appendix. As you can imagine, we've had project development teams through the course of this study, and those coordination meetings continued through July and October and led to a refinement of the various technical recommendations, including responses to the comments as well. We held a strategy team meetings in September and October. Just as a refresher, the strategy team is composed of both the project development team and representatives of development representatives of Sutter Point Specific Plan, Sierra Vista, and Placer Vineyards. That all led up to what we called a 2x2 electees meeting held in September, and Director Halderschelt was one of the electees that was represented at that meeting. The electees are Sutter County's representatives, where Sutter Point, sort of in the study area, overlapped, likewise with Placer County and with the city of Roseville. It was a very good meeting, and Director Halderschelt may have some comments with respect to that meeting that he may wish to share. Lastly, we have a final report here, and it's available to download. There's a link identified in the staff report. It's available on our website. And we also emailed out a notification of the availability of the report to all of the stakeholders. And in that regard, I think we have representatives from Placer County, Rich Moorhead, and we have representatives from City of Roseville, Mike Isom and Mark Johnson. And I think I saw George Carpenter in the audience too. So he may also have some comments that he wished to share. So just to recap here, so there was a settlement agreement between Placer County and Sutter County with respect to the Sutter Point Specific Plan and the Placer Vineyards Specific Plan. Both counties agreed to establish a program of interjurisdictional fair share responsibilities for traffic impacts, including impacts on federal and state highways. And there was an agreement to joint commitments to implement the specific plan traffic mitigation measures and enter into agreements either for a JPA or some other legal framework. So we were asked by the 3 jurisdictions to facilitate this fair share funding analysis in response to that settlement agreement, as well as in response to just generally other issues with respect to growth in that part of the region. And so the purpose of there was a memorandum of understanding executed, and the purpose of what we were to do was to ensure future development contributes their fair share towards the cost of infrastructure needed to mitigate these regional traffic impacts in this portion of both Placer and Sutter County. And the draft report presents those fair share contributions to fund a list of specific roadway improvements, which came out of the settlement agreement and which came out of the specific plan mitigation measures, and these were all necessitated because of the growth in this area. And so to recap, we looked at two growth alternatives, 2040 and a supercumulative. And in the supercumulative, one reason why we have the market absorption analysis is because the non-residential development is quite extensive, and it's probably like a 60-year build-out. And so we also looked at two capital project alternatives, with and without Placer Parkway. The without Placer Parkway was at the suggestion of the development representatives. All the cost estimates for these projects were updated to reflect 2023 cost estimates. A deficiency analysis was conducted, and we evaluated the various trip patterns of how people move around and will get from particular land uses in and out of the region. And all of that led to an allocation of the project cost for fair share between the various jurisdictions. And then we developed fee schedules for each of those growth alternatives and capital alternatives. And all that's consistent with state mitigation law. And the conclusion out of this analysis, and it's the same conclusion that we presented in June, is that there's no need for any sort of cross payment, county payment, because the amounts are negligible in the scheme of things. And so that the fair shares should be, there's fair shares for Sutter County side as well as Placer County side. And on the Placer County side, Placer County and Roseville are already collecting fees since the 2009 settlement agreement. So, in terms of implementation recommendations, and these are slightly refined from what you saw in June, there's three sets. The first set covers Placer County, Sutter County, and City of Roseville. And if you recall on the previous slide, there was, as part of the settlement agreement, creation of a JPA or other legal framework. All right, so we're not recommending any multi-agency South Placer, South Sutter fee program. We're not recommending a JPA. What we're recommending is that Placer County continue to use the existing fee programs they have in place. That's Sparta Tier 2 for Placer Parkway, the City County Development Fee program. Placer County also collects a fee for the Riega Road interchange, and they also have a Dry Creek Benefit Assessment District. And so all of those fee programs basically result in meeting the fair share responsibilities on the Placer-Roseville side. And then we recommend that Sutter County adopt a new fee program to implement their respective fair share. And then the next three are a sort of a collaboration sort of recommendations. And we've been at this process with the three jurisdictions since 2019, when we developed the project study report for Riego and Baseline Road. And so we'll continue to collaborate on the project costs, on the projects, and making sure the benefits are shared fairly. Continue to collaborate to ensure consistency so that one side, when they're looking at a project, is looking at the project in terms of the project scope. And we're not doing different things on different sides of the county line. And then lastly, the current Nexus study that we prepared makes assumptions on federal and state grant funding opportunities. And as you all are aware, in pursuing federal and state grant funding, it's competitive, and it's always best if you can collaborate and you have a number of supporting players seeking that funding. And so we're recommending that there be a collaboration here in terms of seeking federal and state funding, which will offset the costs of any projects within the fee program. Excuse me. So for Sutter County, we also have 4 recommendations, and the first one is not a surprise, because we're recommending that they establish a fee program for their regional transportation projects. And in developing that fee program, there were a number of comments during the course of the study here. And of course, this study could not look at everything, even though we designed it to be consistent with state law. So in developing a specific fee program for Sutter Point, there will probably need to be some refinements. And so the land use forecasts, the type of land use, the market absorption study, the pace for non-residential development. There's adult restricted communities being now looked at for the residential side. So those types of refinements are what will be what Sutter County will need to take into account. The planning horizon. We looked at 2040 and we looked at build out. And there was talk about, well, maybe we should do 2050, consistent with SACOG's MTP SES. And so once again, that's something that Sutter County will need to go through and decide as they go through that fee program. And then federal and state funding assumptions will need to get refined, particularly since State Route 99 is a project that we looked at and it falls within Sutter County. And so the level of state participation and federal participation on an important facility. And then lastly, there's implementation timing and project phasing, how these projects move forward to meet the pace of growth. And so that will be something that Sutter should look at. It was important that we include within the recommendation, and Sutter County staff were in agreement, that we include Placer Parkway and Riego Baseline Road, as well as the other regional projects that were consistent with the Sutter Point specific plan and the mutual settlement agreement. And then we lastly recommend here that the final SPSS report could be used by Sutter County to adopt and implement an interim fee program, and in that manner to prevent any loss of revenue until they complete the final fee program. Once again, that will be a action that Sutter County will choose to do. But the report is consistent with state nexus law, and so it could be used in that regard. And then lastly, because we have a settlement agreement between Placer and Sutter County, that the two jurisdictions work to update that agreement. You have an agreement there that's from 2009, and there's been progress in meetings, and this report is another point of progress, on the timeline. And so once Sutter County moves forward in developing a fee program, then there may be appropriate for both jurisdictions to revisit that settlement agreement and kind of check the boxes on things that have been done. So, as I indicated in June, we'd be back here in October. So, we are back here in October. And so we're recommending that you accept this report as complete based on the recommendations of the project studies development team, and you authorize the executive director to transmit that report and all the appropriate files. And I'd be glad to take any questions.
Great, thank you, David. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Click, would you remind us why PCTPA is in this role?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to highlight that. And so as David said, we as PCTPA have been involved since 2019. And so some years ago, as David mentioned, we were asked, PCTPA, by all three entities, the City of Roseville, both Placer and Sutter counties, to sort of administer this program. I think we were seen as a neutral third party. I also believe that David had the specific experience relative to Sparta and what we've done in the past, that we were seen as a good body to administer this. So let's remember, we had a professional engineering consultant firm do all of this work. And I appreciate the opportunity, because I do want to, when David talks about recommendations and he says we recommend, I want everyone to understand who the we is. The we is Sutter County. The we is Placer County, and the we is the City of Roseville. The we is not specifically PCTPA. So just like we administer the Sparta process on behalf of its member entities, we administered this program at the request of the three member jurisdictions. And just in closing, I'll say, and it's up there, so what we're asking of this board today is not to agree with anything that is in this document, but to merely accept that this is complete and transmit it to Sutter County to keep marching this ball down the field. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? So just for clarity, subject to approval today, does PCTPA then step back? This is now in the hands of the entities to move forward.
That's right. That's right. We've provided them with the sort of, in a manner of speaking, we sort of provided consultant oversight and administrative professionalism to get the report to where it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. David mentioned that representatives were here from the entities. Do any of those representatives wish to speak before we open it for public comment? No? Okay, perfect. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item here in chambers? Yes, sir.
And directors, I'm George Carpenter. I'm the Vice President of Wind Communities, and we're a company that has ownership stake in the Sutter Point specific plan, but we also have an ownership stake in Placer Vineyards, so I have a foot on both sides of the county lines. And normally I'm a guy who is in support of fee programs. Our company does master plan communities, we build big infrastructure, and the way we get reimbursed is through fee programs. But I could not help but come today and tell you that this was a swing and a miss. And staff knows this. I've made my position clear, and I'm mostly disappointed because this was an opportunity to solve a real problem that exists today and is going to exist for a while in South Placer County and South Sutter County, which is the gap area, and David mentioned that. And when this started out in 2019, this was supposed to be an effort to figure out how to find funding, a funding plan, and then do some construction out there to help resolve the congestion that was coming about from development in South Placer County. And what it did is it turned into a $1 billion capital improvement program that was to be funded by development in South Sutter County that hasn't occurred yet, and the remaining development in South Placer County. And that just makes no sense when you step back and just say, okay, wait a second. There's 300,000 people that live in South Placer County, 1.5 million in Sacramento County, who are going to be driving down these corridors, but you're going to just tag $1 billion on the new development that's remaining. The whole concept just doesn't make sense. And so I've raised that, and I just want to make sure I say that again. 2019 is not when PCTPA first got involved in this. It was 2016, and there was an attempt similar to this, but it had Sacramento County involved at the time. And the agencies couldn't figure out how to make this work because one of the major problems is Sutter County just doesn't have good representation in this process. They don't have the technical staff, and so we as the developers were kept outside of this process. I've told staff of my criticism of the lack of transparency. The PDT team did a bunch of work, but the strategy team that the developers were involved with just didn't have an opportunity to participate. And so just really disappointed in how that played out. I do want to comment, there was a couple notes here on the settlement agreement. That it requires that the agencies do what they were proposing to do. I just disagree with that. I was at the table when the settlement agreement was done. I worked on the EIR. I worked on the specific plan. Placer Parkway was going to have an impact on Sutter County, not vice versa, and that just wasn't properly addressed in the work that was done today, or that is being presented today. And then finally, I'll just leave it with this. And I know you're not being asked to approve this, so I won't go into it too deep. But there were technical recommendations that Sutter County adopt a fee program, that the settlement agreement be opened. Those aren't technical recommendations, they're policy recommendations. And so I just don't think it was appropriate for the staff to bring that forward the way it was. And so I'll just leave it there, and I just wanted to be on the record with these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Do we have anyone else here in chambers who wishes to comment on this item or ask a question? Do we have anyone online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I do have some comments, and as Mr. Melko referenced, myself, Supervisor Gore, Supervisor Baines, Supervisor Conant from Sutter County, Councilman Alvord, and myself from Roseville sat down in September with a 2x2x2. I think it's, best captured by the fact that, Supervisor Gore said, look, fees are a challenge. And, we try to look for ways to do things other than fees. But the reality is, without them, I don't think, and my good friend, Mr. Carpenter, and I will have this debate as long as I'm alive. But, in this case, the fee actually is a benefit to the success of Sutter Point and to its residents, whether they be whether they be age restricted or not. There are no hospitals in South Sutter County. So guess which way they're going to come? They're going to come toward Roseville because I believe the hospitals in Sacramento County are much further away. So we had a conversation, and I know that the Sutter County supervisors expressed agreement in the importance of capturing the fees. I think the next day there was actually action on the South Sutter project. We are not here to impose fees. We're here to do a report and move this process along. That's a decision, and Mr. Carpenter's right. And there's a long way between Sutter Point and Yuba City, and not a lot of folks there that, there's not a built-in population. But I just wanted to, since Mr. Melko mentioned it, just wanted to kind of give you a recap of that. And, we went through all of the things that were captured in Mr. Melko's presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paul?
So those were some very well observed and considered comments about this process. I'd be very curious to see how staff responds to that.
I appreciate that. I'd be happy to. Usually I don't, enter into this area, but I'll be happy to. I did not attend every strategy team meeting, which was the PDT and developers. I attended 3 of them. I think those were typically scheduled for about 90 minutes. Most of them all ended early. And frankly, they ended early because when the development team and Mr. Melko, as the project manager, asked the development committee what they thought, there were crickets. So there was plenty of opportunity as part of the process to voice concerns. Some of those at certain points in time did come, as David reflected, and those comments came. But there was ample opportunity throughout this process. The development community was welcomed in to a degree well beyond what was required of the PDT. And the 3 times that I were on those calls, we ended those calls early because there wasn't any sort of specific comments from the development community. So I would just disagree with Mr. Carpenter's sort of observation of the process. I thought it was extremely transparent and very open.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the board? If not, could I get an action on this item? And we have 2 items we're approving.
Yeah, I'll move to accept the South Placer, South Sutter Fair Share Transportation Funding Analysis Final Report. Is complete based on the recommendation of the studies project team development, and then authorize the executive director to transmit the final report and related modeling files and backup documentations of Placer County, Sutter County, and the city of Roseville.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Solly, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez. Aye. Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Solving. All right, the next item is item L. This is an informational item, traffic volume update from Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. As a reminder, this is an item that we bring before you every 6 months or so to talk about traffic conditions out on our freeways here in South Placer. This is something that we did pretty consistently during the pandemic as traffic dropped during COVID lockdowns and then slowly started to ramp up and then eventually met and exceeded pre-COVID traffic levels. I'll start with the 65 corridor. So just kind of as a preamble about what this data shows, this is right now showing the AM peak period, so that's traditionally 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. This is data that was collected only on midweek days. There's a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and it's in the month of June. So, obviously, we all know that on the 65 corridor, there's traffic from 6 a.m. all the way to 7 p.m. most days of the week, even on weekends. And, this is kind of intended to capture what we traditionally call, the commute periods or rush hour, or basically when the traffic is at its highest. So just as a preamble, in the AM peak periods, northbound speeds have been pretty consistently good across the board. In the southbound direction, we're seeing continued reductions over at 65 at Blue Oaks and at Pleasant Grove, and then as the freeway widens out at Galleria, speeds up back up again. In the PM peak, which is 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., We're seeing, already pretty bad traffic speeds in the southbound direction, and those are continuing to stay stable. But what is changing is that in the northbound direction, we're seeing continuous reductions of speeds at Pleasant Grove and at Galleria. And actually, one interesting thing to point out, pre-pandemic, State Route 65 in the northbound direction at Pleasant Grove was moving at the speed limit at 65 miles an hour, and it is now consistently about 20 to 25 miles an hour below the speed limit. So I won't go through these charts extensively. What I do want to point out is if you look at the shaded areas, those are the AM and the PM peak periods. As you can see in a couple of spots, especially southbound at Blue Oaks and Pleasant Grove, that again, traffic is bad all day long. And the gap is only continuing to widen. In fact, if you go and compare it just from 2019 to 2024, again, this is June data, you can see that the gap, especially at southbound at Pleasant Grove, is getting worse throughout the entire day. And then in the northbound direction, again, you're seeing that PM peak start to dip where the speeds are getting lower between the PM commute hour. Now moving to the Interstate 80 corridor. In the AM peak period, speeds are generally good. There's a little bit of maybe slowdowns from the construction that was going on for the I-80 auxiliary lanes, but for the most part, staying relatively consistent. In the PM peak period, we're seeing pretty drastically lower speeds, especially in the westbound direction. Again, some of this could have been affected by the construction, but even pre-pandemic at I-80 at Douglas Boulevard, we're still seeing pretty low speeds that has consistently stayed that way since post-pandemic. So if you,
Sorry, Corey, can you go back to that one? So on the westbound, why is at Douglas, it's got a arrow going up just because there's nominal increase in speed?
yeah, so
It's a year-to-year average, not a 5-year average of.
right, it's just a general increase from 2023 to 2024. That's why it's only pointing up a little bit.
And I apologize for dominating the conversation. So does the I-80 at Taylor Road capture all the way back to Rockland Road, or where does it, or the interchange? Because that's usually, especially in the evening,
Right.
you see a lot of a lot of truck traffic there.
So that's a great question. So just to kind of give an overview of where this data is captured, these are essentially what we call screen line locations. So I-80 at Taylor Road, this would be captured. I believe the actual point is right at kind of the Taylor Road Roseville Parkway exit. So each of these segments is roughly maybe up to a quarter mile long. So it's capturing essentially through that interchange with Taylor and Roseville Parkway.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at these charts, again, I won't go through these extensively, but if you look at, especially in the westbound direction, we're seeing a lot more slowdowns, especially in the PM peak period at Douglas Boulevard. When you compare the pre-pandemic levels in 2019 up to the current year, it's not as drastic as 65, but again, we're seeing more and more slowdowns. And actually, if you look at 80 westbound at Douglas, you can see that it's actually starting to get slower earlier in the kind of the late afternoon, early evening hours around 2 to 3 o'clock. Previously, it was, much more compacted during the PM peak. So in summary, we're still seeing continued declines of speeds on our freeways, especially in the AM on southbound 65, relatively constant on 80, but PM speeds are getting worse northbound on 65, where previously we're seeing most of the traffic heading southbound, where we get that pinch point around Blue Oaks Boulevard. It's starting to widen, and the congestion is lasting longer. And again, most speeds are either at, near, or worse than 2019 levels pre-pandemic. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Any questions from the board?
Well, maybe a comment. As this gets worse, the relief routes are Sunset Boulevard in Rockland and Washington and Industrial in Roseville, as people seek what they believe is their own congestion relief. And those roads will, start to deteriorate, and so that's why, yeah, that's it.
Any other questions or comments? No? Open it up to public comment on this item. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this item here in chambers? Do we have anyone online? All right, wonderful. That's an informational item. So thank you, Corey. I appreciate that. We'll next move
Where's the
to
party?
the executive director's report.
I don't know. Did we get one more click of the slide there? All right, there we go. Oh, excitement outside. Well, thanks everybody. I know we've gone long. I'll wrap up. I'll just let you know that PCTPA continued to be in the community from last month's board meeting till this month. We were at 13 different events all across the members' jurisdictions, from Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln, but also in Loomis and Auburn. So we were just part of that fall outreach that occurs. I will let you know just quickly on the State Road 65, and it's a good segue from Corey's presentation. And it's not necessarily good, but it's interesting to hear that the data backs up what all of you anecdotally feel on a daily basis relative to southbound 65 and how bad it is, and that is continuing to worsen, and that we are starting to see even higher volumes of diversion traffic. In fact, about 20% of the diversion gets off on Pleasant Grove and finds its way through Roseville right now because 65 isn't performing. So we have kicked off our federal raise grant activities, so we will be going for $25 million. That is due the 13th of January, and we're underway and on schedule with that. We have full support from the United Auburn Indian Community and Beale Air Force Base. And just if you didn't know, I know Director Howdeschelt knows through SACOG, as does Director Joyner, but SACOG went through a prioritization and director. See, this is the problem when you mention people by name. And Auburn, see. Our SACOG representatives on the PCTPA board, much safer, know this already, but just so you know, there was only one raise grant that will be approved by and backed by SACOG, and that is ours. So we have the full backing of SACOG in the entire six-county region. That will go a long way and help us in DC. So moving forward to get that $25 million for the southbound State Road 65. Good news to report, Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure, the rebid, part 2, as I'm calling it, is in. We have an $11.4 million budget. There were 3 bids. They were all under budget. That you should all applaud. That's a rare thing.
What's going on?
I don't know, Rick might be able to tell you. But the bid is also $1 million lower than last time. So we're moving forward, working with our partners in Caltrans. Hopefully we'll complete that in summer 2026, and we will do a ribbon cutting on that project. And just lastly, in closing, I want to recognize that Monday is First Responders Day. And while we're always proud of our ambulance folks and our police and fire, we don't want to forget all of the public works folks, whether those are county or any of the municipal public works folks who are out there with all of our other first responders. So we just want to take the opportunity publicly to thank all of them for what they do, putting themselves in harm's way out into traffic to let us all get to where we need to go. So we want to recognize all of our public works folks as well. With that, I'll close.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. That was an informational item only. Any board direction to staff? Okay, I just want to mention a thank you to Corey and Mike. They attended our council meeting last night, made a great presentation, provided some education and updates to our council. So we're very appreciative of you taking the time to join us, especially given it did go a little long due to the extensive amount of public comment prior to us actually getting the official meeting started. So we do appreciate you being there. All right, so with that, item O is informational items. Those were provided to us in our packet. And our next meeting will be December 4th, as you do
Mr. Chair,
recall.
if I could just comment briefly on the informational items, I'd just point you to the Capitol Corridor information and the fact that ridership is continuing to improve, and the outlook is positive both on ridership and trends, as it says on page 110 of our packet. And yeah, it's great that they achieved their 1 millionth rider. Really has a great strong team there, and the rail cars are getting nicer. So it could provide an alternative to those going a long way into the bay,
Thank you, Mr.
which is
Mayor.
a poem.
Appreciate that.
All right.
All right, and that emphasizes the importance of those informational items. They do provide us with that type of feedback. And Michael, thank you for noting the millionth rider for us today in your comments. So, yeah, absolutely. Oh, so with that, our next meeting again is December 4th. We will not have a November meeting. And with that, our meeting is adjourned.